start. We are recording. So Felix, I guess you were kind of initiating this meeting. You want to kick us off, or this
yes.
is most everyone?
All right. So wait, I really failed to see the participants. Okay. So we have Jamie in here now and Marc-Antoine, who are new. Marc-Antoine introduced himself in the last video already. I think it makes sense to introduce Jamie to introduce herself, please.
Sure. So hi, my name is Jamie Joyce. I'm the founder of the Society Library. I was a founding member of Canonical Debate Labs. Was here when we started forming as a group. However, the debate and digital democracy projects that I was working on were already moving forward, so I come in and out of these meetings. However, Timothy High, Kevin Bentley, and Stefan, who are all a part of Canonical Debate Lab, have helped with various projects that come out of the Society Library, like the Great American Debate and aspects of the internet government, although that's not really fully rolling right now. So that's me. Do I give an update as to how all that's going now, or are we just doing introductions?
I think it's fine. I mean,
let's do introductions first to go through it quickly, and then we can.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, I will be next. I'm Felix Dietze from Germany, Aachen, studied computer science, and had one discussion project as my master's thesis like 5 years ago, all graph-based, and I learned a lot. And I'm mostly interested and specialized in curation, community curation, and protocols for that. So next, Bentley.
Yeah, Bentley Davis. I'm mostly a software engineer. And my current project is I'm working on what I call Reason Score. So it's basically an experiment to do a scoring method on debates that doesn't include voting. So it's less opinion, more fact-based. Anyways, so that's the pitch.
All right, so and Stephen, Marc-Antoine, and Timothy did it last time, so I guess we skip it, right? Jamie, you said you had a lot of new stuff going on. Maybe you just pop in, tell us about it, and we start the discussion from there. What do you think?
Sure. Okay. So I know that a part of the reason why we have these types of discussions is to identify where we disagree. So a chronic disagreement between the projects I'm working on and some other groups in CDL have to do with curation versus, or professional curation versus crowdsourced curation. So the projects that I'm working on currently are about curating ideas, arguments, opinions, claims, and evidence from skilled or trained curators or moderators as opposed to crowdsourcing. The project that we were working on over the past 2 years is called the Great American Debate. The topic that we decided to focus on was climate change. And what we were doing was just extracting arguments, claims, and evidence from various forms of media, which included television and books and social media, scholarly articles, websites, everywhere we could like suck in information, and then extract those arguments and claims and then recognize different patterns and categories that would naturally arise when you're looking at a large enough collection of those claims and evidence. And then we would create a hierarchical model of the deliberation, which would yield what we call fundamental questions. So we never posed questions that we would then look for answers. We instead would just start taking content related to climate change, deconstructing it into its little units of logic, which are claims and arguments. And then we would just notice patterns. And those patterns became what we call subcategories or categories that all started to coagulate around some sort of position, and then we noticed those positions pointed to questions. So the fundamental questions that arose from doing this with climate change was, what is climate change? Is it occurring? What causes it? What's the impact? What could or should we do about it? And why has this debate persisted for so long? Which is really interesting. So last month, when COVID-19, went viral, so to speak, we noticed we were monitoring global news output through one of our partners called the CDL project. And climate change had never really, if my memory serves me correctly, penetrated more than 10% of global news coverage. Even when Trump announced, the U.S. was pulling out of the UN, I don't even think that penetrated 10% of global news coverage. However, COVID-19, within a span of a few weeks, started penetrating 40% of global news coverage. And this is a project that I believe pulls in television and news publications from over 100 countries and instantly translates it. So we just noticed, like, okay, this is the most important conversation in the world. All of the foundations that we were pursuing funding for gave us notification they were changing their priorities. So not only is it just the most important conversation to cover, but we're also our hands are kind of forced to change. So the Great American Debate Climate Change Edition was meant to, we were racing to publish and these debate maps October of 2020. And then we switched gears and now we're working on a project called COVID Convo, where we're kind of doing the same thing. Unfortunately, we don't have the benefit of having had 2 years to deconstruct language and notice patterns. So we've kind of arbitrarily used what we've known to figure out what the fundamental questions could be, just so we can put something up online so we can get funding for that project. So that's what we're doing now. We're getting ready to apply to a bunch of foundations with the demo that Tim has really helped with. Kevin has helped with immensely. He's not, I'm sorry, Stefan has helped with immensely. He's not here. Kevin may be propping up our argument mining API that we haven't used in a while. So that's what's been going on. New front-end developers too, who described the new UI of the debate map to essentially be like a modularized wiki. And they're really great. They're a couple, so they're extremely, and they're a couple and they're quarantined and they have time. So they've been really great about adding all the shiny features that we really wanted for a long time. So that's what's going on with us.
Okay, thank you, Jamie.
Yeah.
I was wondering, I think one of the most interesting aspects, I think, is, could you please share what you learned? What are the big learnings you had with these projects so far?
Yeah, so my big learnings are, the biggest one of all really is when you arbitrarily choose a question, you are prematurely shaping the conversation. I think that every single debate project out there that chooses questions is doing it backwards. And I actually had an interesting conversation with someone yesterday, just a high level connection of someone's like, you two should talk. And I was discussing our process, and he said that in some sort of field of linguistics or communication, this is like a theory that's been explored, is that questions are derived from language. You don't do it, vice versa. So I think that's my biggest learning, is that every single debate project that poses a question and aggregates answers, while useful, and we will scrape and reference their data, if you want to get some targeted information, sure, ask a question. But if you're trying to model a societal debate, which is what we're interested in doing, is modeling an entire society's debate, you don't ask the questions. You just go and see what people are already arguing about. And then you just shape the relationship between those things. You relate what's relatable, and then you'll start to notice that they'll form their own structure and they'll all point to a question, an underlying question that is the reason why people, why a debate is persisting, is because people don't understand something, they disagree on a fundamental point. So that is my, I think, biggest learning in this space. And then also, I really trust our process, and I will die on the hill of skilled curation as opposed to crowdsourcing. We've created a program where volunteers can come join in and take a task and help with that task, but they must be trained first, and their work has to be reviewed right before it even publishes anywhere. So I wouldn't say that's a learning, that's more a stubborn assertion, but I'll just add that as well.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah.
What I wondered is, how do you, when there's so much new content coming in, how do you find the right place where to put it?
Okay, so fantastic question. So where to find the right place to put it? Do you mean in the map, or do you mean storing it database wise, or?
In the map. Like
In the map.
is it that people know, oh, something like this existed before, and then
This might be my area to answer, Jamie. I don't know if you want to hand that off to me.
Well, yeah, Tim, you do an excellent job mapping, and you are mapping for us now. So you can answer the question, but like also I take your stuff and reconstruct it. So maybe we can like go back and forth at this answer because we work together on this part.
Yeah, that's kind of the answer too, is you go back and forth. But well, that's how the map gets formed, right? You go back and forth. But the specific question of how do you find where to add it? I mean, the answer is in part, it depends on the tool you have, right? It depends on what resources you have, because in practice, this is one of the main issues or problems, I think, of onboarding someone new to mapping, is because I am so focused on the mapping. I've touched in so many different parts of the map. In some concrete way, the map is an expression of how the debate has organized in my brain. So it's easier for me naturally to find things and to know, oh, this is where this bucket of information should fit. So a familiarity with the map makes it so much easier to go and find where to add the next thing. And to know if, like, oh, you know, we haven't even touched on that subject, so we better open up a new branch here. That's one of the answers. And not a very satisfactory one when you want to crowdsource and open it up to more people when you want to scale. The next answer is, well, in the tool that we're using, written by Venrix, or Stefan is his real name, is like in the process of doing it for the climate change debate, the first thing we had to ask for once the map started growing was a search feature, right? So you need, oh, you know, where has somebody talked about this before? And when you're using technical terms, the search can work a lot easier, because if you're looking for CO2 or you're looking for RBD sequences or something like that, then you have a technical phrase you can look on. Technical phrases have multiple ways of expressing them. You know, for example, are you going to write carbon dioxide or CO2? So when you're searching for a place to put something and you have a term you can latch onto, you can use the search feature, which is right now just strict. It doesn't even do natural language matching approaches in the implementation he has. You could obviously envision that happening easily, but at any rate, you're only going to get hits that match the exact phrase you're looking for, the word you're looking for. So you'll have to search on different variations to find it. In the case where, you know, in the COVID-19 mapping that I'm doing, there's different ways of saying COVID-19, right? You can call it SARS-CoV-2, you can call it COVID-19, you can call it coronavirus, you can call it novel coronavirus, you can, but so I've been personally sticking to COVID-19, which is my standard, but other people could come in and put it, they don't know my standards. I'm not enforcing them. So, you know, I'll remember I created a map and I'll remember the exact term I use and I can search it and find it again, but other people may not. There's a top-down sort of logic to a map. So people who are coming in out of the blue can at least go, okay, you know, and they start at the root and they'll go, well, it sounds like I'm trying to get at something along here. But if you're talking about, you know, how did you have information on how the latest tests on hydroxychloroquine went? You don't, you know, is this going to be down under how is the U.S. administration managing the outbreak, or is it going to be under, you know, should we wear masks, or how should you treat patients? There's lots of different ways you can go, so it's not obvious, but you can kind of try to follow logical organizations to get down there. From my perspective, from the white paper perspective, the long-term vision of this would be the best tool you have for finding is going to be going along the context elements, which are attached to a knowledge graph, right? So you can almost just state the thing you want to say, and it should be able to naturally match it up to context elements and start suggesting things that are related or maybe even the same claim. That's the long-term vision. I think it's totally possible to do if we can have a complete enough knowledge graph. But that would be one of the main approaches I choose.
Yeah, Tim, and you also mentioned something that we care very much about at the Society Library, which is the standardization of language. And so I put a lot of red tape around mapping. I just let you map because you're great at it and you're a great help to us. But otherwise, everyone else is working on extracting claims and arguments. And before anything, wait, what is that, Mark? Antoine, you asked a question, popped up.
Yes, I'm saying in terms of mapping, like all this issue of having standardized mapping, don't you have aliases? Can't you have multiple linguistic terms for a given concept?
Absolutely,
well, this
yeah.
is where, yeah. This is why I was saying it depends on the tool you have, because in theory, that solves everything. But you know, the current tool we have hasn't been implemented to be able to search for aliases.
We have variant phrasing though, and we can link definitions. So one of the things we do is for a term, we can, you know, COVID-19, the novel coronavirus, you know, even though those are actually different, right? Like COVID-19 is a disease and the novel coronavirus is a virus, SARS-CoV-2, or right, we'll just have those two. You can link those as having the same definition. So if someone hovers over it in the map, they can get the same definition to describe what that same concept is. But otherwise, the standardization of language, not only of just terms, when people are extracting claims and arguments before we add them to the map in the normal process, right? Tim is super special to us, so Tim can do what he wants. Everyone else is just working on argument and claim extraction before it goes onto a map. And it's not just the terms that should be standardized, but it's also the linguistic structure. So how it sounds. Like one of the problems of like these crowdsourced debate platforms is that it's like an essay that was written by like 10,000 people. And so like there's not the same reliable like way of explaining something linguistically in terms of the grammatical structure of sentences. And so that standardization of like, okay, we comb through all these claims and arguments and make sure that there's like, you know, as least amount of adjectives while capturing the nuance as possible, so that the meaning is conveyed in the same, like at the same pace, claim by claim by claim by claim. So that's another thing that I've learned, I think is really important, is that there's some way of combing through and standardizing the grammatical structure of claims and arguments before inputting them. Not that variant phrasing isn't useful, because for us as an educational tool, one of our design goals is to enable understanding and comprehension. And so we know that our way of standardizing the language may not click for some people. So it's really important that we capture every single iteration that point has been expressed. So we just, you know, keep every iteration of claim and argument, and then we have a refresh button where someone can refresh and they can see it written another way, explained another way, explained another way. Here's a metaphor for it. And someone can just flip through however many iterations of it that we found so that they'll understand it. Because our goal is that everyone can understand what's on the map, even if they have to change the reading level or they up to technical jargon, you know, whatever configuration they have to play with. Our goal is to just get everyone on the same page.
Thank you.
That's another thing we learned.
Yeah, I think that answers my question.
Cool.
So last time we had a bit of an open discussion with Ben, Marc-Antoine, and Timothy. And I think one of the topics that was not completely finalized was, should we tie conversations or the data to people or not? Like Marc-Antoine said, okay, it's important to view the perspectives of different people. Well, Timothy said, okay, no, we can talk about people, like this president said that, or claims that, but we should not capture like who said it, or not present to the user who said it. Was there a conclusion last time? So what was the state?
No. There was not. I think the problem is, from my standpoint, we have different hypotheses, and a lot of them are we didn't explore our respective core starting point hypothesis, and we didn't get enough into that. And some of that is entirely my fault. I didn't have yet the time to read the whole canonical debate thing in depth, but I saw that we have different assumptions and that these assumptions are worth discussing. So yes, we did not reach a conclusion because I think we started way too downstream in the debate, and there's many more basic assumptions that we didn't get into.
Felix, are you the one editing the document, or who's
No, I'm not.
anonymous narwhal?
Not me either.
I wrote a bit of stuff.
Stefan. All right,
But
so
feel free to change anything. Was
yeah. So when we're having this discussion, I think we're not being clear in our own terminology.
Correct.
Anonymous. Well, I guess there's several points here. One is, I mean, to me, anonymous means we don't know who created the comment. But what we're saying is that we don't want to necessarily, we may not want to show who made the comment, and also, or the claim. And also, I don't see a claim as something someone did. A claim is a community edited or a professionally edited description of something. So there's not ever a single person responsible for a claim. So you can't even like put a face by it because they're not the sole arbiter of what that says. It's a community resource.
Sort of like trying to copyright ideas, right?
I agree totally on that point. Idea ownership is evil.
Well, yeah, but this is, yeah, right. So, yeah, so is anyone suggesting that we do like say, oh, you know, this person put in this claim and put their picture by it like a Facebook post, or is no one thinking?
I think the discussion was more around highlighting what people's views or acceptance of those claims. So in other words, you know, I want to know, the most common one is, I want to know what scientists believe about this claim, or I want to know, you know, I want to know who it is that believes this is true and who it is that doesn't believe this is true. Or, you know, so a more sinister approach to this would be, you know, I want to know what this talk radio speaker believes about this issue.
I think that when you're dealing with conflicts of interest, it is absurd to not have the different groups mapped out. Like you know, this group claims has this interest, but this other group claims that that group actually has that more sinister interest for it, and da 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 da. It's all about attributes.
Isn't that it's a debate all itself?
Yes,
I mean, that falls right into
it is,
which means it can be expressed in the platform, but it would be expressed as a claim that
I'm saying it has to, and I mean, a lot of what happens in actual debates is attributing intent, and a lot of claim checking is about saying, well, who made that claim? What are their interests? So we need to know actually who made the claim often.
I think there's a way that you can have it both ways, right? And I think, like Timothy said, it's almost like it's a debate or a claim unto itself, right? So there's the one hand where, you know, the truth is the truth no matter who says it. It doesn't have to be an expert who articulates something that happens to be informed and cogent and ultimately true, right? And unfortunately, like, if a person who states a claim or is responsible for inputting a claim doesn't appear to have credentials, someone reading it may have a certain bias about who they are and then disregard that claim, right? And that's fallacious. However,
again,
it does. Oh, wait, I'm going to do the other side now. The other side of that is that, yeah, it actually can be really important if you have like 97% of, you know, scientists with a environmental related degree coming to consensus on something versus like a small group of people who are middle class or lower class, live in high crime areas, are not well educated, have all, you know, a bunch of other things which indicate they don't know, you know, what they're doing or something, saying that these scientists have malintent, right? That could be a valid point to take into consideration, that someone would want to know, like, oh, where is this information being generated from, can be very important, but that's a claim unto itself almost. It's not that you need to put Dr. So-and-so next to every claim that's made by a scientist, but a point to be made within that discussion is that, hey, people who have professional degrees who spend 8 years studying the math and science in order to be able to fully comprehend these complex systems happen to side on this part of the debate versus this group, which, you know, they have paranoid psychologies, and lo and behold, they are making
interest in oil in oil and gas.
Exactly. But it's almost as like in the infrastructure of the debate, instead of assigning who is responsible for making a claim, that is a claim in and of itself.
But what I'm saying is you cannot take away the claimants from the claims that way. I agree that when I said claim or ID ownership is evil, I'm saying sole ownership, like I made that claim originally, so I decide how it's going to be expressed. That's ridiculous. It has to be shared ownership. But on the other hand, knowing who is making the claim originally, sometimes it will be reported claim, sometimes it will be whatever, but you kind of have to know who stands behind it. Yes, that's one thing, but also where it originates.
Why do you have to know that?
You have to, because as I said, if the claim originates from somebody with vested interest, that's a claim unto itself. And unless you know that the claim originated with that person, you cannot make arguments about interests, vested interests.
It doesn't matter who makes the claim. If the claim has 100% support by evidence and 0 proof it's not true, in that situation, would you say it matters who makes the claim?
Well, I would say it does. I would say it does, absolutely.
Why? Where does it make a difference?
Because you said, okay, because zero evidence, it's not true. Maybe it just hasn't been made yet. The question is, if there's no evidence that a claim that I find personally suspicious, and that's my own ideology, of course, and my own bias, if I find there's no evidence, well, maybe I'll look for it.
That's fine. That that's the point. That's the point of the debate, is to look for the evidence. But exactly. Let's suppose
but I'll certainly have more incentive to look for evidence against a claim if I know it comes from somebody who I know is a systematic liar.
Yeah, but I
think it does more harm than good, knowing who makes claims. Sorry to interrupt you, Bentley. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. Yeah, the point, you would be more vested, but what we're hoping is that people will be vested in inspecting the claims regardless of who made it, and do it across the base. So we would rather, or not we. My thought is that we shouldn't do that because that kind of says, oh well, that encourages people only really investigating when it's someone they don't like, as opposed to the more rigorous.
Let me try to phrase this in a way that makes sense to me. A situation in the canonical debate that's not showing who made claims, right? If there's a claim down there, for example, if you watch somebody on the news make a claim, you're going to see who did it, and you'll have that instant bias towards it, and that might motivate you to get involved, right? And that is a value, is getting motivated, right? And I think the point you're making is, if the first time you come across that argument is instead within the canonical debate that doesn't say who made it, and it's like a fresh, brand new claim that hasn't seen any follow-up validation, right? So you don't know who said it, you stumble across in the canonical debate, there's no arguments for or against it, and you don't know who said it, you're more likely to just take it at face value and not get involved in trying to validate that claim, which means we've lost something by not showing who stated it within the system, right? I agree with that. I think that at that point, there is a loss in terms of motivation of engagement with the debate.
Not the point I'm making, by the way.
Okay, but this is a way that it makes sense to me within the canonical debate. I would say that in that sense, in that circumstance, I would agree with that it would be interesting to know who. But you will see that in real life debates outside the platform, and I don't think it's necessary to incorporate into the platform to make that happen.
I think so too. Last time we met, we talked about like optionally opening the claims you want to make visible to others, and I think this would be a use case for that. If you want to make that claim and you want to say I added that, and you can still do so publicly, right?
Well, not within the system is what I didn't agree that would be a good idea. I think sharing outside of the system, having a share option outside the system makes total sense.
But is the intent to say that I added it, or is the intent to say I believe in it? I think that's the more useful information. I don't think who actually types it in matters.
In a way, I mean, what's the difference if you believe in it and you added it?
Well, because only one person added it. Hundreds of people believe it.
Yeah, I
it's a canonical
mapping,
debate.
I map both sides because I'm trying to fill out a map and get as much knowledge as I can find into the system. We could even have systems that automatically add it, which means the claim was made by a machine. Is that what you should take into account then in that case for the claim?
I just want to mention that this is not a problem with a skilled team of professional curators, because we would automatically invert every single claim and argument we have and then go and look for evidence.
I disagree with that in the sense that it is, we've discussed this before. The problem with that is if the platform only allows access to a skilled group, hand selected, it becomes a target for accusations of bias in the same way that WikiLeaks is, right? No, you guys are just stooges for Putin, or you guys are stooges for Trump, or you guys are stooges for the radical left, right? You get accused of that, and then your experts are no longer reliable.
It's a different front to fight. Fair.
Well,
Fair.
yeah. Well, on that point, because I'm hitting that same thing in Reason Score, is that two things. One is if you properly express the other sides than what they think your bias is in the content, they can't really argue saying that you're biased because it is in there. The only time that they can argue that you're biased is when the claims that they want to see in there aren't in there, or the claims are expressed incorrectly. So that naturally goes against your claim. And the other thing is have an open claim submission process and just have it be approved before it goes visible, but everyone can see. So, if Fox News doesn't like what I said in my system, they can go in and put a comment there and they can always link to it. Those are two ways to kind of bypass that.
The question of bias is a real question. See, for example, one reason, my real point about identity is sometimes you want to get rid of trolls, and trolls aren't necessarily the curator. If you have curators, they still have to know that somebody makes trolling arguments. So that can become a basis for identifying a set of claims as noise. I mean, we live in a situation where a clear disinformation strategy is making as many false claims as possible to pollute the information space. So origin of claims is important in that context.
Make a note of what your next thing is going to be. I just want to respond quickly to that in 2 points, which is first, there's two different types of spam or attacks of trolling here. One is quantity.
Tim, can I shortcut you real quick and just say that, Martin, I don't think anyone in this group disagrees with what you said. And I don't know that we need to go into details on how we fight trolling, but recording identity to stop trollers, none of our arguments have been saying that we wouldn't do that.
Right, yeah, we mentioned that last time. We do need to track identity, right? But so for the question of spurious spamming, like a denial of service type attack, then we do need tools to prevent spamming, which is identifying when a single user is creating way too many spurious issues, right? And that is an algorithm that has to be defined. but is doable.
No, but what I'm saying is, even if we have, for example, vetted curators who will be known to not do that, if we choose to not go crowdsourcing, I'd be intermediate on the crowdsourcing, by the way. I believe that curating is a skill and it has to be taught and learned. On the other hand, we have to be kind of open on the curating board to avoid bias, not just accusation of bias, but real bias. But that's a different story. But once you have that, you have the reality that there's a lot of spurious claims being made. And the real work of identifying claims means also identifying this huge number of spurious claims. It's the honest curator's work to identify those spurious claims.
Yeah.
Well,
again,
but
wait,
no
one's really
I disagree with that. I disagree with that last point, which was that it's the curator's responsibility to deal with the spurious claims. The curator doesn't deal with claims, or deal with in the sense of prove or disprove. The curator doesn't participate in the debate. The curator only
records them. He records them.
Or they get entered automatically by the system. It depends on, again, this is an empirical question of, do we need to put a gateway before the claims can enter and they have to be hand approved, or can it be approved through crowdsourcing? Those are all kind of empirical questions. But at some point, it's open to the public to put in the claims.
Okay.
There's a system that reduces duplication. So each variation on spurious claims can only be done once. And the advantage of crowdsourcing is it's not on the elite small group of curators to deal with that. It's the crowdsourcers who care about this thing and say, this is another fake news thing, who can go in and knock those down. So I hope there's a balance there.
I don't understand the role of the curators.
The role of the curator is to essentially refactor or organize the debate.
Yeah, if you go on to debate websites that are up and running now, they're not logically organized. Like, it seems like the extent to which moderation occurs, it is a claim. Yeah, and I mean, I'm not going to go and source evidence, but boy, could I. So the debate projects that I have,
it's the universal quantifier I'm contesting. Existential. I'm contesting the universal quantifier. I would not contest the existential quantifier.
Okay,
of course, there's many badly organized sites out there. That doesn't mean there's no well-organized site out there.
Oh, is that what I said? Did I say all of them?
Yes.
Some of these people have sites,
me. Got it, excuse me. Not all of them. The ones that I've seen. I haven't seen yours.
Fair enough.
Okay. A lot of the ones that I have seen that my memory is recalling right now are not really logically organized, in that the extent to which a moderator is moderating is to remove spam. And it doesn't seem as though the logic is actually well established between claims. It seems as almost like in one platform in particular, there's some columns and people can add relevant claims and arguments to the debate question or the claim ahead of it, but there's not actually the logical proof which establishes the relationship between those arguments or claims. So one of the things we do at the Society Library, and we probably can't do this for COVID Convo because everything is way too accelerated, but what we have our students and volunteers do is they actually have to write out the logical proof that links all of the claims in an argument, because they either have to identify if there's some sort of implied claim that's not present, that's needed in order to establish the logic of the conclusion, or we just have to explain this is why these claims actually relate to each other. So it's a lot of work, and it doesn't seem as though many platforms that I've seen actually have the curators have had the training to understand that is a necessity for establishing logical reasoning. And so that's our goal, is to do that with more resources. COVID Convo, our recent pivot, is happening too fast to really do that. So we're just going to do the best we can, given that we have minds that have been trained in that. And then there's another point I was going to make, and then I totally forgot it. So I forgot it, but there's that.
Basically, we were speaking about refactoring, if that helps jog your memory, and the role of, I was asking what was the role of moderators and curators.
Thank you so much. Oh, you're the bomb. Okay, so the other thing I was going to say is that The Society Library's long-term vision is that there is a degree of research that'll be done, right? So for every claim that we extract from content, we automatically create the opposite claim. And then we use that as a point of research to go, like, we just essentially search that claim and see what reasoning have people like associated with this claim, what evidence exists, and then we would scoop that in as well so we can create a balanced debate, right? And so the role of the curator also for the Society Library is to identify claim origin, right? So we don't just strip away claims and just have text, right? It's like, this claim came from a meme from this Facebook page, right? And like, this is a really important meme because it's gotten so many shares and it's an idea that's traveled. But like in our, drive, we have, here's the meme where this originated from, right? And so the goal of the databases that the library churns out is that people can find source origin. Our goal as a nonprofit is to be like, or is to give the utmost respect to every point of view as possible. Even if it's like all churned out from the Russian IRA, it's like, let's give the most respect and dutiful attention to every point of view. So yes, we may have originally extracted this claim from a meme, but is this meme one part of a larger logical proof that represents a point of view that actually has like valid points? We're gonna go and find that and make sure that the diversity of sources where this idea can be related to is also represented, because there may be a grain of truth in something, really ridiculous. Like what I teach my students, a really important, one of my favorite examples is we were scraping Twitter and of the climate change debate, and we found someone's tweet that said, global warming isn't happening because Venus. And it like, I saw that and my mind just blew up. I was like, what does that, like, what are you talking about? But in adherence to Society Library principles, it's like, okay, this person most likely saw something, ingested some sort of media, came to a conclusion, and is just unable to re-articulate it. It is our job to go find what that person saw and represent it better than perhaps they were able to articulate it, because they obviously cared about this enough to tweet it, right? And so that led us down a rabbit hole of like this research, which indicates solar flares may have a disproportionate impact on the warming of several planets, including Venus. And it was comparing like the greenhouse effect on Venus and Earth, and like trying to control for all of these other variables to indicate that it was like actual sun, like solar activity, that was having a disproportionate effect, which would lessen the impact of man-made emissions and things like that. And so like being able to articulate that just by plucking out the keywords global warming and Venus, for us is really important, even though like it could have been retweeted 1,000 times by trolls and people, making fun of it. Even with stuff being churned out by the Russian IRA, there could be a grain of truth in that. And just because they're national enemies in some ways doesn't mean like we shouldn't investigate the veracity of a part of what they're saying.
I understand the value of doing that, no question.
That is a different definition or perspective of curation than the canonical debate paper perspective, which is like I would call those content advocates. The role of curator as defined in the canonical debate paper is just in the refactoring sense and not participating in the debate. But obviously we recognize that it's very important to have advocates on all sides, not just on either side or whatever of a debate, but also advocates that just want to see good quality debates. And so a lot of the work there that Jamie mentioned, that she puts it as like her content analysis process and so on, is exactly along those lines. I wouldn't call it curation, but more like content advocacy.
Yeah, I'd like to say something to the experts curation versus crowd curation, because many people say that it's either or, and I don't think it has to be. I think it starts with experts. That makes sense, because it's as Jamie stated, it's a difficult job and it has to be learned. But I think this, as Jamie pointed out already a little bit, if they're training new people, their new content has to be reviewed. So, and what they're doing is basically they're widening or enlarging the group of experts this way. And I think that's how it needs to be seen. So it means like, it doesn't mean that the crowd is doesn't have any skills or anything. It just means they have to be trained to become experts and then make a larger group of experts. And I think we need protocols for that.
I would add to that as well, that like there are different, I started trying to document it in the white paper and I stopped. And I think there might be a side paper that went into more detail, but again, I stopped because there was a lot of unnecessary work at that point. But there are different actions that a curator performs, so that can be considered curation, right? And they range in level of difficulty, level of like complexity and need to do something, or difficulty to make a decision. So like the easiest ones, I would say, are, you know, choosing a better title for a claim, or maybe attaching context elements. If it can't be done automatically, adding context elements to a claim. Another one, which we discussed earlier, was if we need to put some sort of gateway into the claim submission process, just reviewing a claim, making sure it's not spurious, and then letting it into the system. Those are pretty simple that probably most people could do. And so potential for that might be crowdsourcing that kind of curation. If you get 3 people that are, and you'd have to put restrictions because otherwise you could have a group take over this. But if you could get 3 random people, let's say, approving a claim to enter into the system, then it could be done in that way, crowdsourced. Another level of difficulty would be detecting duplicate claims. Or, you know, if that might be done automatically via context, but let's say moving an argument from one place to another, because you often see an argument made in the wrong location and you're like, oh, but this is useful elsewhere, and you just want to be able to kind of drag and drop it and put it somewhere else. That's some level of skill. You need to understand how the map works and the structure, but it doesn't take a lot of skill to do that. And then more risky and complex would be regrouping things under a larger claim or a category or that sort of thing that moves stuff, or a whole bunch of stuff around, and, you know, might somehow change the face of the debate. My contention is that should not be crowdsourced, and I think Stephen, you took issue with that, and I think it's definitely up for grabs. But the point being that there might just be different levels of skill and crowdsourcing versus control.
Yes.
So first of all, Felix, I completely agree with you. And second of all, Tim, I don't know if you remember, when I first introduced myself, I mentioned the internet government. And Tim Bentley, I don't know if you remember, in the beginning of CDL, that was my main focus, was something called the internet government, right? And what that was is a distributed content analysis process. So the work that we do now is content analysis, where we take media, we transform it to text, if it happens to be video or audio, we deconstruct by sentence or paragraph, we extract claims and arguments, you know, we identify categories and then reconstruct it, right? And so the internet government's long-term vision is that this is a system that has tasks that the system itself allocates to individuals. And Felix, to your point, the idea was that it was going to be bicameral. There'd be a team of skilled, trained curators that are processing content in this assembly line style of tasks being distributed. And then anyone could also participate and essentially be the intercoder, like reliability checkers for the skilled curators. So it's like they're both they're both like cross-checking each other's work. This can be accomplished by tasks being allocated by a system to a random set of people who are anonymous to each other, given the same task, the same media, and then seeing if they come to the same conclusion, if they take the same action, if they label it in the same way, if they, you know, highlight a certain part of it in the same way, and then there would be a statistical distribution of consensus. I found someone who made a really badass distributed content analysis process, who will license it to us, which is really dope. But we're not there yet because we really need to nail down what are the specific tasks to deliver the output, right? So like right now we're doing it manually with Excel spreadsheets and processes and protocols, and we're we're training interns. We work with like 20 universities and we source interns and we make them go through this process of, we teach them logic and argumentation, which could be video, right? Anyone who wanted to participate in this mass crowd content analysis process would watch a few videos, do a few little tests. They pass, they get allocated a task. And then, you know, if they're a troll or something like that, they may consistently make decisions that are counter to the consensus of the randomized group, in which case, you know, the group will be pinged and be like, hey, look this over, confirm your decision once more. And if there's one outlier, eventually they'll be kicked out, right? But the way that otherwise works is that someone works within a specific level of task complexity, and then they have the opportunity to move on and move on and move on and move on until eventually, and we, you know, I talked about gamifying this, right? Like, someone who could be the president of the internet government is the person who did the most micro tasks. And there's certain levels, like where you get like certain identities and badges based on the work that you do. But it's not like you could be on Wikipedia editing whatever you want. It doesn't matter. It's like you can only operate within like a very specific bucket. So you can't like do inadequate work, right? With Wikipedia, like I could change a period to a comma in Wikipedia, and that counts as an edit having occurred, right? It's like the only way that you would get like points to like move on or to get like special titles and things is if you completed the task based on the value of the task allocated by the system.
Jamie,
So
isn't this like community creation at that point? I mean, how is this different from what we're advocating?
So I'm not saying it's different. I'm saying I'm not saying it's different. I'm saying this is a longer term vision once the system itself can completely manage what people are allowed to do. Because with crowd curation, as I see it, with technology that exists today, there's so much flexibility, and that's where I see the problem. And because of the flexibility of how people are able to write and where they can organize and what they can do, that creates a lot of problems that a trained team of curators would know not to make those mistakes. But if we know enough about what needs to be done to create the debate map output, we can actually make the tasks that people are allowed to do so rigid and allocated by the system that anyone can participate, because the system's rigidity is what prevents all of the mistakes of people just starting out and wanting to contribute. But that's like down the line once we really know what the hell we're doing, which is what we're working on learning right now.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. This hits a lot of very good points, and this is exactly the systems I'm thinking about a lot. So I really have to write that down. I'm sorry.
I've been working on adding those things to my system as well. I've been trying to make very fine-grained permission systems so I can allow these things. Or also the other thing is local rights. There's badges, there's competence, but there's also areas of expertise. So I can say somebody has these badges in this area, but not globally.
Yeah.
So we're getting kind of close to an hour, though we started a little late, so we can go a little on, but just want to see if anyone wanted to.
If there's,
I gotta hop off.
I can quickly add my view on curation, which indeed is a bit different from Tim's. I also believe in a crowdsourced curation, definitely, but I still think that I would remove as little as possible. And if you do want a personalized curation view, like maybe GAD, you can still just filter and just show a subset of all the arguments that are available and present that.
That was the approach that we discussed for the GAD. As a matter of fact, I don't know if we're going to actually have time to do it that way, but we were talking about layer 1, layer 2, where GAD is a layer 2, and basically because Gruff, which is the system I'm working on, is more time-based and fully auditing. The debate map just generally shows you the latest structure, and Gruff uses a graph database, and so whenever you make a change to the connections in the graph or add or change a claim, it saves the old structure and creates a new set of links. And so what you can do is refer to a claim as of a certain timestamp or a certain sort of vision. Timestamp's a tough thing. If it's a centralized system, so it's the one system timestamp. I'm not going to go into global timestamps. It's not being implemented right now. But anyway, the point is that the GAD could have in its system, it can look at the graph and have its curators essentially approve a claim to appear in their system. And it would approve it at that point in time. And so when they go to look at the graph, based in Gruff, in their interface, they would look at each claim according to the timestamp that had been approved. And you do sort of a content management system in that sense, where you could get a notification if there's a new version of that claim in Gruff. It wouldn't show up on their interface, but their curators could go and say, oh, yeah, okay, this change is acceptable. It's been approved. It's up to quality. And they could go adopt that and show it on their system. And so that's sort of what you're talking about of a curated view onto the general canonical debate.
My opinion has always been that I've never believed in a global view personally. I believe in multiple curated views representing different viewpoints, and how to make the bridges between one view and another so that one view always hints at the broader context. But
right, I think that's a fundamental. That's like as fundamental as you get in terms of a difference of approaches.
Exactly. That is the real. I totally believe in meshing multiple views as opposed to finding the quote unquote canonical view. I believe both approaches are interesting. There is definitely merit in trying to go towards a canonical view. But my fundamental approach is I don't expect that to succeed, so I'm trying to get multiple views to talk to one to another.
In a separate meeting, it would be interesting. Not now, because I don't know if people have enough time. But
Yeah,
in a separate meeting, it would be really interesting to go into that in detail, a deep dive on how you see that.
Yeah,
I think
can you scroll down, please? I think we should have some suggestions for the next agenda, because our brains are into it right now.
So one would be that, to have Marc-Antoine talk about his view of how to mesh different viewpoints from I guess, you know, different hypergraphs, merging them together, and how you approach that. A second thing,
something I'd like to prepare for, but yes,
right, for another meeting. If there's any time left, it would be interesting to go back to a question we never fully resolved, or we didn't go all the way down into, which is where you see showing who made a claim as being beneficial and how it would appear in the canonical debate. I could see it if you're having different viewpoint graphs or different hypergraphs from your perspective, then really each person has their own, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So that's a totally different way. Yeah, that's a different way to do it. But how would you see that being reflected in the canonical debate, the canonical approach to it?
Right. And how to avoid, and I agree totally, how to avoid too much bias of dismissing claims because, oh, this is this person's claim.
Right.
While
that's the main point of hiding it. Yeah.
No, I understand. I understand that.
Yeah.
The one thing, go on. One thing I would like to discuss for next time is more at the data model level. I mean, I'm curious what you call a claim. I'm curious if claims are addressable. There's a lot of things. Like for me, claims are very time bound and origin bound.
What do you mean addressable?
How easy is it to make a claim about a claim? Is it a generalized hypergraph as opposed to a graph? So this is very technical, but it's a discussion I'd like to have.
Write that down. Can you please?
Yep.
Yeah.
For agenda, so we can finish this.
A claim about a claim.
Yeah, maybe we shouldn't get into it right now, Tim.
Yeah, maybe not. But I do want to kind of at least understand the idea. Then we can try to answer it. But the only claim about a claim that is inherent, it's built into the system, is this claim true, or that is it acceptable, or do you believe it? It's a dialectic binary thing, and the pro-con has different ways of saying it depending on the kind of claim. But yeah, that's.
If I want to say this claim is motivated by special interests, this is a claim about a claim. It's a good example.
Yeah, that's a separate.
That's the core of the system, though, right? That's all the system does is claim on claims.
Yeah.
That's the
good. This is the question. I mean, what is the data model that allows this, and blah blah blah. I mean, I want to. Good. I'm happy to know that meta claims are. at the core, because for me they are as well, in history and origin. And obviously you've thought about a lot of that, but I'm curious to compare data models on this issue.
Okay,
All right.
cool.
All right,
And
so
we
we
answered that with it before
Bye,
going
everyone.
over time.
Bye, Jamie.
All
Bye.
right. Bye-bye.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, everyone. I think we should make a cut here. If anyone has more suggestions for the next agenda, we can, of course, add them even after this call. And yeah, let's see if we have a good introduction of DBAS on Monday.
Yeah, and I guess then we will reintroduce ourselves as well, or we'll see. So that might be already long.
I think yeah, that's a good point. I think these trying to have very short introductions is very helpful if for other people watching the video.
Okay.
So
like one under a minute, 30-second introduction.
Really, like really short.
Yeah.
And
okay.
Right.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thanks
everyone.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Very good.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.